Learning only works when you are responsible, when you're engaged with real actions, and you are aware of the results of your actions, and you're responsible for them. You, you know, I often think, why does driving even work? You got these people zooming around at 60 miles an hour in these 2-ton vehicles, and they don't kill each other all the time. And the reason is because they pay attention and they're responsible. And when they make mistakes, they pay consequences.
Ideas shape people. People shape culture. Culture shapes society. But most people never examine the ideas. iNTv is a conversation about the assumptions beneath modern life, where psychology, philosophy, culture, politics, and relationships meet. The name is inspired by the Myers-Briggs personality framework. I'm Damien, here with my co-host Josh. We're both INTPs, and this space is dedicated to thinking things through fully. Welcome to iNTv.
Excellent. So our guest today is Mr. Lincoln Stoller, deliberate non-specialist who works in psycho, hypno, and neurofeedback therapy in tandem with numerous other counseling services. He holds a PhD in theoretical and mathematical physics from UT Austin, including a postdoc assignment at UC Berkeley. And he eventually moved from quantum physics to create a management and automation software platform for businesses. Plus, he climbed mountains, did mountaineering, lived abroad in different lands, and is even a certified pilot. So he's authored over 10 books, published at themindstrengthbalance.com. And his latest book at this time recording is Dreaming Yourself into Being. And to say he lives well outside the bounds of normalcy doesn't even begin to cover it. As he said, we should just keep doing out-of-the-box stuff. And if people aren't calling you a little crazy or a little nutty, then you probably aren't exploring enough of the boundaries. With all that, welcome, Lincoln Stoller.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you. Let's
Thank you.
start off at a gallop here. Let's just talk about the things you're interested in, which I'm interested in too, which is like how people shape their ideas and change their ideas. And I sort of trace it back to how people learn or not. And I trace that back to what you started to do when you were a kid, whether you were encouraged to learn and had the opportunity to learn or not. So I think if you look at a lot of people and culture, you don't see a lot of flexibility. You don't see a lot of creativity. And, like it drives me nuts listening to the news where people don't distinguish between irrational behavior and nonsensical ideas, you know? So like
Okay.
Donald Trump is nuts. I mean, he's just nuts, okay? It's not a question of is this a good idea or a bad idea or is it going to work out? He's just nuts, okay? He's just at
Okay.
some point you have to realize that there's a difference between good ideas and crazy ideas, and you have to
Okay.
draw a line somewhere. So this is like what my counseling is about. Most people's problems border on somewhere in between. They got some crazy ideas, and they have some wrong ideas, and they have some good ideas, and they can't tell the difference. And
Okay.
it depends very much on who you interact with, what you're trying to do, what your background is, what your opportunities are, whether you really like yourself and have faith in what you're doing, or you're playing catch up to what you've been told you should do. And so I look at culture and politics and people, and there's a lot of confusion. Confusion can be good, it's like an opportunity to change, but you have to have a rudder. Most people seem to go through life without a rudder. They just get spun around all the time in their emotions and their ideas and their feelings. And I'm trying to
Okay.
basically give people teach them how to sail, through life. How to like trim the sails and the rudder and have a heading and have a sense of direction.
That's
So, I
fair.
did all this stuff and that's where I am now.
Okay. I mean, I think so. Based upon what you've just said, I would assume that you think being a well balanced individual is kind of a is a is a is a goal that people should aspire to.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to understand whose definition of well-balanced are you going to take?
Right. And that's kind of what I was leading to for my question. I was going to, based upon what you kind of said, I wanted to know, how would you distinguish like individuality, genuine individuality, from simple rebellion and like a non-conformity type of personality?
I think the answer is feedback. If you're responsible for what you do, then you find out whether it works or not. If you're not responsible, you can have all kinds of crazy ideas, you know, and you have to feel responsible and be responsible. So, like parenting, a lot of people are crappy parents. We don't have to look very far. And that's kind of cultural, where people don't feel that they're supposed to do anything for their kids but keep them safe rather than provide role models, and culture that doesn't really consider young people to be anything more than tomorrow's employees, responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
then, so I think that the trouble is pervasive, and the solution has to be pervasive too. Change of culture. I don't think this industrial revolution was very well thought out in terms of developmental psychology. If you look at psychology, it was very much a kind of Frankenstein's laboratory of how to get people, social behavior, and the whole idea of diagnosing illness, and some of the like ADHD, medicating kids. It's like it doesn't seem like there's anybody upstairs in this whole effort.
Yeah, it does seem like it's kind of rudderless and everything. And you mentioned that like it's really important to have that grounding, that feedback, that understanding of what we're doing. What is it you've noticed when you're helping your patients? How do you convince them to have a rudder or some sort of solid standard to go back and forth with to make better choices?
Well, ultimately, I can't do anything that my clients aren't interested in doing. I could talk all day and waste their time, and they'd probably leave pretty quick if they weren't getting some result. I mean, this is the funny thing. People come to me or any counselor with an issue or a problem, but they're not necessarily looking for a solution. They're looking for a way to make their way work better,
Yes.
and it didn't work before, and they want you to fix it.
Mhm.
Sometimes they want to say, well, I'm broken, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, fix me. Or these people in my life make me depressed and anxious, fix them. But not too many people really want to look at different ways of thinking.
Not all
And
the
you
time.
can understand, this is how you've learned to think, and this is what you've invested in, your identity and your relationship and your social role, and you don't want to, and you're kind of stuck in it. Well, that's too bad. Not too many people are willing to, go back to perhaps square one. I mean, imagine if you were trying
It's
to make
difficult.
your way through a maze and you refused to ever go back. You'd be screwed, It just wouldn't work. You have to admit mistakes. So
Right.
I'd say that's sort of the answer to your question. The way you learn what balance is by finding imbalance and being responsible for it, and learning what was out of balance, and hopefully how to put it back in balance, or at least the direction you should go,
Hmm.
and interact with people. I think it's great to be a counselor. I mean, what are you guys? Do you have a counseling? I mean, you obviously everybody like counsels their friends, but do you consider yourselves experts in counseling or something like that?
Counseling for me, no. Yeah.
New medicine, so not so much counseling, but
Well,
I definitely think it's
you
important.
say that you're thoughtful people, and that makes you unusual. So, don't. I mean, I guess you're doing this podcast because you think that you have something to say. So there you are, counseling, sort of, not one on one, but so I mean, how far is it going to go? You're not running
It's
for office. I'm not sure that's anything to write home about. But what would you do if you could do with what we're doing right here?
I
Would
mean,
you like plug it into people's heads and make them think differently?
I don't think that works. I don't think that that's like you just said. I don't think that that works. Forcing people to think things is. I never think that's an option. But it's always for me about exposing people and introducing people to ideas so they can kind of get comfortable with them or familiar with them and kind of let that thing seep in. Like I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's called Harrison Bergeron. It's similar to that in my in my opinion, where
What's it called? Harrison what?
Harrison Bergeron. It's a Kirk Vinegar.
Really?
I think
I
it's
don't know.
Vinegar short story.
No shit.
But he
Okay.
turned it into a movie. Basically, the whole idea is just that, it's a secret society, and
Uh-huh.
there's this, they do a presentation. The guy takes over. He knows some information about society that everybody else doesn't know. He does. He locks himself in the programming room and tries to bring the ideas to the other people who have been kept from ideas, and people kind of like don't listen, but they do listen a little bit. He's trying to help them, but he does. They don't accept the help. It's good. It's
Right.
a good watch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an old story, the person who figures things out and tries to bring the knowledge back to everyone else usually gets either thrown out or crucified or
There you
heck,
go.
Yes.
People don't like change. Apparently, there's something about that that seems mildly uncomfortable.
Well, to try to put it in the positive light, which is not so easy, I would say that, like learning only works when you are responsible, when you're engaged with real actions and you are aware of the results of your actions and you're responsible for them. You, I mean, it's like I often think, why does driving even work? You got these people zooming around at 60 miles an hour in these 2-ton vehicles, and they don't kill each other all the time. And the reason is because they pay attention and they're responsible. And when they make mistakes, they pay consequences.
There you go.
And if any of those things didn't happen, it would be you know, a murder scene out there.
Exactly. That's how
Right.
systems are built. I mean, you have to have people who are trying to get somewhere, who both are using like the guardrails and the ideas of like what we're doing. It's either going to help them get closer toward their goal or keep them farther from it. And then when you make a mistake, I got my driving, you get a lot of immediate feedback. Don't do that. Otherwise, we're going to have a bigger problem. And I think it comes back to the thing, like you said, with the responsibility, like people have to have stake in the game, have some sort of stakes to actually allow them to say, all right, I have skin in the game. I've got to get this right. I've got to do this if I want to achieve this outcome, if I want to achieve this goal, if I want to learn something, if I want to become better. Whenever we go through all this pain in life, like we come against something that we can't move and we can't actually get around this obstacle, then we actually start having some more motivation to change. And I think that's a different time when it comes to learning. We have a little bit more investment.
So this is what I do with therapy. I approach that problem and, for in order to have some sort of structure, I say, let's talk about it in 3 components. There's what you think, the decisions you make, the perceptions you have, your analysis of the situation. And there's what you feel, which is not always, so rational. It's, wherever it comes from, who you are, how you've been brought up, how you react to things, what triggers you. I mean, they're valid things, or at least they were responses to previous experiences that are still happening. And then I like to emphasize, there's your brain's ability to cope with novelty, change, surprise. Uh, are you resilient? Are you ever calm? Do you even know what calm means? Because if you never are, how would you know? And what are your
Right.
coping strategies? Are you really engaging? Or do you tend to rely on habits? They could be bad habits, they could be good habits, but if they're habits, they're probably not that responsive. So, do you get angry? Do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you go to comfort? Whatever. And it could be bad, could be good. But I like to read, or I like pornography, or whatever. So, like, rather than judge those things, like, why do you do them? could you do it? Could you be more balanced and not need some of that coping strategies? And I think that's a brain thing as much as anything else.
Right.
People who are addicts tend to have an addictive personality, and they might excuse. And I think in our culture we do excuse them, say, well, that's just who they are. But I don't think that's true. I think you can actually change your equation, and so I call that brain training. And
How does that work?
well, I think you have to. First of all, you have to explain it. After the brain, your perception, your response, your awareness, your anxiety, your elevation, you know, so you explain it. That doesn't go very far. And then you try to go into like exercises to calm or enervate or balance. Could be your diet, could you be your physical health. It could be your circadian cycles, sleeping. So a digestion, or it could be, and this is where I get to brain training, where you can actually look at your brain waves and say certain brain waves are anxiety flags, signals, and others are a signal of lack of engagement. And you can, of course, if you learn to engage more and relax more, you would, if you were successful and became more relaxed and more engaged, you would have trained your brain just by doing it. But you can also just look at the brain waves and just try to train them down, balance them, which I find very interesting because it doesn't involve a topic. It doesn't involve a subject and no triggers. It's just learning to balance brain waves, very abstract, but if you get some feedback, you can do it to
Has that
varying degrees, different people, and no one's exactly the same. But I introduce that, and I get funny reactions. Mostly people don't believe me, which is too bad. So I just keep saying it.
has that
And,
been successful for you? If you put like an EEG on people's heads and have them like train
oh,
their
oh yeah,
voice?
sure. But they have to be willing to pay for it. So, it's like I'm trying to sell them a vehicle they don't even want to drive. So uh, I've got to say, look, it's relevant. If you're anxious or depressed, yeah, part of it could be your life. You're going to make some excuse about your past or your future. But part of it, a big part of it, could be your just tendency. And
Habits.
if you're willing to work on that, you could find a balance that you're not going to find by just banging your head against the wall or whatever the problems are. So that's the point here. Some of the times you learn from feedback and engagement, and other times you need to learn in a different way. So,
Okay.
I don't know, this is kind of a bad metaphor, but if you want to learn how to drive, you don't necessarily go out and drive. You kind of learn how to be situationally aware. You learn how to pay attention to what's going on around you uh, in a way that's not the same as, normal conversation. If you're driving with somebody, you'll often see that they don't normally converse. They're paying attention to the road, especially if you're in New Jersey. If you ever drove in New Jersey, it's crazy. The highways there drive me. Um, but people in New Jersey learn to deal with it. I said, it's like driving in Manhattan or something. You learn to deal with it, but you don't want to learn it
Right.
just by doing it because it's a little too dangerous. So there is a skill to it, and you'd like to learn the skill one step at a time. So I say this, brain training is sort of like that. You'd like to take it down to the roots. But, people listening to me and listening to us say, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And so with each person, I have to like frame it. So if they're anxious, I can talk about anxiety, and I can really just try to convince them that it's a problem separate from what's bothering them. Just the fact that they're an anxious person or an addictive
Right.
person or a depressed person or, an angry person. So,
Okay.
that's the best I can do.
So, I mean, I think like through all of that, like when you look at mental health, like what are you optimizing for? Is there a particular thing? I know you're saying that it's a different, something different in everyone that you're addressing, but like as an overall goal, is it like adaptation or authenticity, integration, or
Well,
something
I'd
like
get
something else?
spiritual if I could. I would say purpose and value and meaning in your life, however you want to define those things. What motivates you? What's really, I've done a lot of things in my life without exactly knowing why. I just wanted to do a lot of things. And the mountaineering, some of these things are hard to figure out. So, what is mountaineering? It's a lot of suffering for a pointless goal. And what you learn in it was very valuable. You learn to trust people, you learn to be real, you learn to deal with failure, you learn to guess your way forward and cope with your mistakes, and you learn to face death, basically, or other people's death in the sense that you're responsible for them. And you are. I mean, we're not just talking about hiking. We're talking about, serious mountains where, you can be buried in avalanches and stuff.
Wow.
So you
Yeah.
learn to have some distance and some, what's the word? Balance, It's like, and it's weird because I would always come back from these mountaineering trips in a real high. I'd survived, I'd achieved, I'd prevailed. And then like 2 days later, it's like back in the muck, being bothered by all the same old shit. And, and, and it perplexed me, what's going on? Am I raising myself up and just falling down again? Or it's like painting a house and then having it wash off in the next rain. What wasn't happening here? And it took me a long time to realize that it was a state that I had to hold on to, a state of balance and direction. And it didn't necessarily stick unless I held on to it. I had to go
Interesting.
back to the normal world and say, these things are not important and these things are important, like life, like truth and responsibility. And I liked mountaineering because what was valuable was not what you achieved. The material goal was the fleeting thing. That's why it never stuck with me, because getting to the summit doesn't mean anything. And it's irrelevant in, the normal cultural life. But it's the
Right.
process of having a goal and believing in yourself. So that's what I try to encourage other people to do. And it starts with sort of an argument or a discussion. And like I say, people come with a problem and they want a solution. They don't want to hear your solution. They want you to solve their problem their way. And I like working with high performance people because they're often the most open minded and self confident,
Okay.
you know. So I say, "Oh, you're fucked up. Do it this way," and they'll say, "No, sure, I'll try." I don't care. But I don't take it personally.
Uh, See, and I think that's super cool. But the thing that popped up while you were talking, and you're saying like you have these goals or these aspirations, and you know values and meaning and kind of like drive. But what happens when you encounter? Well, do you encounter people whose values and drives are rooted in other people's affirmation of them? Do
Sure,
you?
everybody's got that, but that's what you have to get out of. I mean, I really think you have to elevate yourself. You can almost think of it as like levels. There's the social level of approval and acceptance, and then there's like somewhere up here, there's a spiritual level of self-love and self-respect. And those two levels, there's quite a bit of difference. You don't get self-respect just by getting social approval. I'm
Right.
always interested in celebrities who have so much social approval and tend to have no self-respect. They're constantly like committing suicide and doing other things that wouldn't happen if they valued their bodies in their own and their lives. But then, that's a fabrication of my own, when I see this stuff.
How do you get people that you're working with to get that self-respect, that self-confidence, and like to build their identity as somebody of worth?
Well, you know, I think that's the fundamental question. How do you find yourself? And there, I can think of two answers. I ask you what you think, because ultimately that's the way you think. That's the vehicle you're driving. You may be like driving a dune buggy or a skateboard in terms of trying to achieve some significant thing. And the other way is, I mean, that's not bad. It's just, doing it your way. We can try that. That's the way you're going, that's where the momentum is. What are your problems? What's your family's issues? What's your heritage and so forth? Or you can go down to the bottom. And there's a certain sad truth to that. If you just make enough mistakes, you'll eventually run out of mistakes. And, and then you'll either have to figure something out, or be condemned to hell. So, that's sort of you know, the AA model of dealing with alcoholism. They go and hit bottom and then accept God, which is fine, but it's hard to hit bottom, and I'm not sure it has to happen. I mean, I don't know. I'm not God. I don't know where you have to go to finally see an alternative. So here, the two reasonable answers. That's an unreasonable answer. Screw yourself up to the point where you realize you've got to change. Okay, well, there are a lot of people who they don't need help doing that. They're busy doing that.
They got that down.
You might help them when they get there, and that's okay. But it's not easy, and it does have to do with your brain too. There's been a lot of success in training people's brains out of addictive behaviors. But the other two things that I find are three. I work with dreams. Dreams are very strange. They're called a psychotic state, but you don't live in them, so they don't bother you. But if you can engage your dreams more fully and live more in your psychotic state of your dreams, you can encounter a lot of your fears and confusions in a way that's personal and very idiosyncratic to you and often meaningful. And I think that's the reason people forget them, because they're too heavy. And it's not easy to figure them out because they're not exactly puzzles, they're more challenges. But working with them, talking, discussing, connecting them to your life, your future, your feelings, is a good way of dealing with substantial issues in a very personal way. So, dream work. And like you mentioned, the last book I wrote was on dream work. Another way is psychedelics. But, it's not easy to use psychedelics. I mean, it's easy to use them, but it's not easy to get value from them. You have to really work at it. I think it's pretty well agreed you have to combine it with therapy. Otherwise, it's just, around and around and around. But it's a good way to face your horrors for half an hour.
There you go. Is that like CBT? Is that the kind of therapy typically you help people with?
Anything.
DMT?
If you've got the juice, you can do rational therapy or emotional therapy or just, anything that's serious and honest and responsible and continuous. It doesn't even have to be with a counselor, although counselors have the benefit that they're not judgmental and they're not attached, which are
It's fair. You
important.
have to have a certain level of education to be able to do some of those things. You have to have a certain level of thinking.
Experience. I don't know about education because there is no real good education for the use of psychedelics. Traditional cultures use them, but they use them in other ways for other purposes, and you're not one of those cultures. So if you're a Westerner, there's not a great deal of information. There's psychologists who are hawking psychedelics, but they don't know what they're doing. They're making that up as they go along, like we do everything. And
Right.
some of it's good, some of it's not so good. It's getting better. I mean, I've been watching it for 20 or 30 years, and it's getting better, but slowly. It's got to, the old guard has to die off, and the new people who basically came from the underground and had the experience have to move into the position of knowledge and so forth. And so there are dreams, psychedelics, and I use hypnosis, which is an underappreciated and underused tool. Hypnosis is like halfway between dreams and psychedelics. You bring somebody into a vision and you disengage them from their body and their normal thinking patterns. And what happens is, if it works, you start to narrate your own fantasy. And it can get really powerful. It
Okay.
doesn't work with everybody. And you get better at it with practice. And it does take, well, for example, I have on my website 40, 50, 60 MP3 audio files, which are hypnotic inductions on certain topics. So they're health topics like your digestion or your heart, your breath, your joints, where you're attempting to get more in contact with your breath or your joints or your pains or your emotions or your childhood. And these are canned in the sense that I pre-recorded them.
Right.
And if I work with people individually, I can be more customized because I know what vision, I know where you like to be, I know what colors you like, I know where you grew up. I can bring you back to your childhood vacation home, and I know something about your parents. Also, you have to realize people who come to me often have serious problems or serious trauma in the past, and so that's obviously a place to start.
Right.
So those are three
Yeah.
things, like hypnosis, psychedelics, dream work, and there's all kinds of tangents. But I'm not sure what. I think I was trying to answer the question: how do you find meaning and value? And those are the tools that I think will cause those things to sort of rise to the surface, or at least you can tease them to the surface. Whereas just
And
talking, cognitive stuff can go around in circles that you'll avoid and and fake your normal
right.
life story.
And just like you said, so you said like, and I think it's known that a lot of trauma exists in people's childhoods, and so a lot of this, not just trauma, but just parenting and schooling
It's
and just
trauma.
ways.
It's for a kid. It's trauma.
It
Like,
is.
yeah. So I guess the thing that's interesting to me is like, what do you suggest, or what do you think that we're missing in raising children as like parents, or teaching children as like teachers? What are we not instilling? Like, what's not coming from the culture that you may think that we need to
We're
be
not
doing
taking
more
them
of?
seriously. We're considering them as infants and ignorant and and in need of our wise guidance. But I think that's completely wrong because a kid has a real vision of a world that they're trying to figure out that's real to them. And it's a different world. It's a smaller world. It's a less able world. It's a more vulnerable world. And for you to come as an adult and say, this is the real world, or this is the adult world, or grow up, it's like it's bullshit. So a kid's got a real world. And if you want to be helpful, it's not a question of pulling them up into seeing the adult world. It's a question of you going down and remembering what it's like to be a kid. And some of that's like developmental. You have to remember that kids just like to play,
Mhm.
or they don't like to focus too much, or they don't like to sit still. So, what do? You read them stories, you play with them, you talk to them, you try to get them to talk to you, which often doesn't happen, or it's not encouraged very much. But you want to you want to establish a mentorship. I mean, you're not going to be a mentor teaching irrelevant stuff. We send kids to school and expect them to be engaged in all this irrelevant stuff, which is not developmental. It's just, tools for being an auto mechanic when you're 25 or something. And, so I blame the schooling, which is not development based, but I also blame parents who are not taking responsibility to raise their kids.
Yeah,
And
yeah. We definitely have to find time like to meet people where they are and like speak their language. Like what you said
speak
there.
their language. That's right.
The kids are real people. You got to treat them like they're real human beings with real cares, real desires, real hopes and fears and dreams, and speak to that. And it makes a lot of sense. And if schools aren't going to do it, like how do you think we as human beings can like teach these kids like to think more independently?
Well, that's your attitude. Maybe you shouldn't. I think, this is like counseling. Like, you can't say, you can say what you think people should do, but it may not be right. So I would, my vision of what adults should do to be better parents is simply take responsibility for the emotional state of your kids. And if they're not happy, it's your fault. So, that may not be true, but it's still better to take the responsibility and try.
Yeah, at least be aware and like listen to what they're coming back. That's like the feedback you mentioned earlier, which I think is key. So at least you can see how what you're doing is affecting them and then how they're responding. So you can see what the next step is in the path of building that kind of self concept, their identity, and then building that ability of agency to say, what more can they do with what they have?
It's not easy, obviously. Young kids tend to bond with their mothers, before they're like 3. And so a father may have a limited opportunity. But, you've got some, you could, you know, take them jogging, you could take them to the park, you could take them outside. It's very difficult for an adult to focus on, those, boring kids' toys where, the little circles go around and around, reading the Hungry Caterpillar book 50 times, driving an adult crazy, but a kid could do it. So it's not easy. And then, when kids, so I've mostly engaged my sons when they were older, and like now I have a 15-year-old, and it's difficult for me to put myself in his world. I mean, there's sexuality. I don't know what you want to call it. It's like this, social sexuality, gender roles, and it's all distorted, and I don't think it's very healthy. But that's what they live in, and that's what they talk about. And I feel that my role is mostly to be a clown because I can't say anything particularly smart, but I can say a lot of stupid stuff. And if they're interested in hearing, whatever I can do that they're interested in hearing is what I should do. That's the vehicle to be engaging. To be engaging. Uh, I
Yeah.
remember I was at a friend's family party a couple of weeks ago where there were kids and adults, and the kids were sitting around in their own little group, and they started to ask each other, "What is love?" And I thought that was a wonderful, and I came in and opened my mouth carefully, but I thought that was great that they would, here were kids from ages 10 to 16 talking about that. And what could you say as an adult that would be useful? Obviously, if you're going to go start lecturing, you're useless. But, what could you say? Mostly you would have to listen and sort of get the vibe because there's certain things you could say that would be accepted and others that you'd just be blown off. But if you're taking it seriously and you're sincerely concerned and you're willing to put some time into it, those I think are the ingredients. And then you just have to let it cook. Maybe some kids are going to reject you anyhow, and then they're going to have their issues. Like a lot of families are broken families, and I mean, I didn't grow up in a broken family, but if I did, I'd be angry. And so I think there's a certain amount of anger floating around, and kids don't know how to deal. They don't know how to place this stuff. They're not given a welcome opportunity to express themselves. And often, if you do allow people to express themselves, and this goes for counseling too, they make you the target. Well, you asked for it, and that's fair game. If you want it
Right.
to come out, who's it going to get put on? I charge money because I'm sort of the toilet. I could put it on me,
They can stop
and
it.
I'll rinse it off, but I'll
Right.
recognize it's necessary to squeeze it out, to put it in gross terms. Um, so that's
Yeah.
probably true for kids too. They got to be angry, they got to be upset, and you got to not try to tone it down, not try to balance it in adult terms, because that's not their world.
Okay. Well, I know we're getting close on time, but I just wanted to understand what's your vision of like the future. Have you seen things improve? Since you've been in this a long time, and doing counseling, psychotherapy, and everything. Have you seen like improvement over time, and like what gives you hope for the future of further improvement?
That I'll be dead in 20 years. Then I'll be free. Then I won't have to worry about it anymore. Peace, right? No, I mean, I think you have to take the long view.
Okay.
I think you got at least 2,000 years of perspective you have to have, and things are going faster now because there's greater travel, greater communication, greater commerce. But I mostly see more confusion as a result. People are less able to cope with the fast changing. I mean, look at American politics. Americans are making decisions that are affecting the rest of the world. They don't give a shit. They don't even know. They don't care. They're worried about the price of gas. That's not the world variable that's going to make for peace and prosperity. They're very narrow-minded and short-sighted. That might have been okay if you were still riding horses and, you know, buying all your food from local sources. But now, we're buying worldwide, and we're shipping labor out, and we're buying oil and gas, and on elections are making decisions for other people's economies. So I mostly see chaos, and I can't feel all that confident that it will all straighten itself out.
Sure.
So I think, again, what are your responsibilities for young people? How could you make things better? Well, podcasts is one thing we're doing. We want to talk about what it is to be responsible and think things through. And hopefully that will create a, groundswell of careful minded people. I mean, that's the
Nice.
best we can do. And I work at it
That's
individually, and so do you.
Man, it's a step in the right direction. I like it. Um, I want to give you some time to plug your website and tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll keep the information in the description as well. But let everybody know.
Well, I don't feel like we've solved the world's problems, but I do think that it's worth stating them, right? And
Right.
so I keep writing these books. I've got 3 books on learning. They're good. Check them out. I have 3 books on sleep and dreams, and a couple of books on hypnosis. So the Mind Strength Balance website is mindstrengthbalance.com. And it's a big website, and it's got lots of stuff. And there's a blog. If you subscribe to the blog, which is free, you get a download of the latest book, the Dreaming Book, digital copy of the Dreaming Book. And if you want to talk to
Nice.
me, you can, click on some calendar, and I'll talk to you for 15 minutes for nothing. Now, people should take
Nice.
more advantage of that. Apparently.
Yeah, hopefully they do. When they see this, go ahead and click that and get those 15 minutes. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll give you some shit.
Nice, nice. Well, no, I mean, like you said, we haven't solved all the world's problems in 45 minutes, but you know, we took a step in the right direction. And I think it was interesting conversation. We dug into a lot of topics, and you know, I enjoyed it. Hopefully, you did. And guess we can just close it out. Any final things that you want to say
Yeah, I
outside of
would like kick people's butts. You know, do it. You know, what is that Adidas
Nike?
thing? Just
Nike,
do it.
just do
Or
it.
was it? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like do something.
right,
Reach for it, stretch. Because if you don't stretch, I mean, it's like physical. If you just sit around and do nothing, you eventually atrophy, and that's works socially and personally and spiritually. You gotta stretch, so do that.
right.
Like it.
Cool.
Got to stretch to grow, and only actions change the world. So that's what we're going to do. I like it. Start with ourselves.
All right. Well, we're out on that note. Appreciate it. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
thanks a lot.